Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're attempting something. Well, maybe the ultimate shortcut. We've pulled together this massive stack of sources. It looks a bit like the secret reading list for, the world's most elite training programs. Think about the kind of curriculum that shapes how top consulting firms like McKinsey approach strategy, ethics, leadership,
Yeah.
all of it. We've got philosophy, military doctrine, cognitive psychology, the real foundations of modern business thought.
That's right. And, the typical view of let's call it the McKinsey mind, often focuses just on that structured, hypothesis-driven problem solving, diagnose quickly, get to the recommendation.
Yeah, the framework.
Exactly. But when you actually line up these sources, you see something deeper. The fundamental challenges, they aren't really intellectual puzzles. They're human challenges.
So the mission today is to find that universal playbook, right? We're hunting for those frameworks that work across time, whether you're leading a huge corporation now or a SEAL team, or maybe even running a Roman city-state back in the day.
Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating is that the sources show the big struggles for a modern CEO needing mental clarity, making ethical choices, building organizational success. These are fundamentally the exact same problems figures like Confucius or Cicero were wrestling with centuries ago.
So we're here to synthesize that wisdom, to try and show you, the listener, the constant principles that really underpin effectiveness, cutting through all the noise and complexity.
And maybe the best place to start is with the most pressing issue for any leader today. How do you make reliable judgments when everything around you feels like it's shifting?
Right. Uncertainty. Yeah. Because we hear it all the time, don't we? Especially in the startup world.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. Follow your intuition.
But the cognitive science, the stuff from Kahneman and others in our sources, it tells a slightly different story. Our gut instinct. It can be, frequently misleading in the kind of world we operate in now.
Okay, so why? What's the catch?
Well, it's this critical distinction researchers like Daniel Kahneman and Gary Klein identified. They found that intuition, that quick, reliable judgment, it's really only trustworthy when you operate in what they call a predictable environment.
Okay, predictable environment. What does that actually look like? Define that for us.
Think of it as a place where cause and effect are pretty consistent, stable, like a chess grandmaster, or an experienced ER nurse spotting familiar symptoms.
Right, they've seen it thousands of times.
Exactly. They've received thousands, maybe millions, of timely, accurate feedback signals over years, even decades. The rules of the game don't just suddenly change on them.
So experience builds this reliable, fast, almost automatic judgment. That system one thinking Kahneman talks about.
Precisely. If you've seen the pattern 10,000 times and you got immediate feedback, yep, that was right, or nope, that was wrong, your intuition becomes incredibly valuable.
But, and this is the big but, right? The modern dilemma is that most of us, especially leadership roles, are operating in the opposite kind of environment.
Absolutely. Think about a long-term stock market forecaster, or a political analyst trying to predict elections, or a CEO trying to navigate a really volatile, disruptive market.
Yeah, the rules are changing constantly.
The environment is unpredictable, the feedback loops are slow, sometimes they're even deceptive, and the underlying rules change so fast that what you learned yesterday might actually hurt you today.
So in that kind of chaos, intuition alone is risky.
It becomes much less reliable. And that's where rigorous, structured, maybe hypothesis-driven analysis, that classic McKinsey approach, actually becomes massively important. You can't just rely on instinct.
And that uncertainty, that unpredictability.
Yeah.
It must be absolutely terrifying during what Andy Grove called a strategic inflection point, that moment when an entire industry just shifts.
Oh, definitely. We looked at the history of the computing industry through Grove's eyes at Intel. He talked about that huge shift from a vertical structure, one company like IBM controlling everything.
On a whole stack, yeah.
To a horizontal one, where you had different companies specializing in chips, operating systems, hardware, and so on. That inflection point, it didn't come with a warning bell.
It was almost invisible while it was happening.
It was terrifyingly subtle. Grove admitted, even looking back, he couldn't pinpoint the exact day, maybe not even the exact month, that the industry morphed.
Wow.
He described it like watching one of those computer-generated images dissolve from one face into another. You know it's happening, but you can't see the exact moment of change until, maybe it's already passed.
And the danger isn't just making the wrong bet.
The biggest danger there is often indecision, vacillation, just freezing up.
And the cost of freezing, of hesitating.
Well, look at Intel. If they had hesitated longer, if they'd spent years desperately trying to cling to their old memory chip business while Asian competition was just crushing them on price.
Instead of going all in on microprocessors.
Exactly. If they hadn't committed fully to that exploding high-margin microprocessor market, even though the future was murky, they could have lost everything. That transition demands analysis, yes, but also the courage to act on that analysis, knowing you don't have perfect information.
Vacillation. Execution killer number one, as they say. Okay, so even if we avoid freezing, even if we make a decision using the best analysis we have, our own minds can trip us up when we look back at how things turned out.
Yeah, this brings us straight into cognitive traps. #tag B. Avoiding cognitive traps in decision review. And this is where that Kahneman-style cognitive science is just invaluable for leaders. Probably the biggest trap when you're reviewing past performance is something called outcome bias.
Outcome bias. Okay, what's that?
It's judging a decision only by its result, not by the quality of the thinking or the effort or the information you had at the time you made the call.
Oh, I see this everywhere in business, right? Some massive high-risk gamble pays off purely because of luck.
And suddenly the executive is hailed as a visionary genius. We completely confuse luck with skill. And the flip side is just as damaging. A really sound, well-researched decision based on probabilities goes wrong because of some totally unpredictable external event, a black swan.
And the decision maker gets blamed. Crucified, sometimes.
Exactly. And the organization learns completely the wrong lesson. It learns to reward the lucky gamble and punish the sound process that just ran into bad luck.
But wait, hang on. In the real world, the market does reward the outcome, doesn't it? Profit is profit.
Right.
So how does a leader stop the organization from just adopting that, flawed logic internally?
It takes discipline. You need a structured review process that forces the team to mentally go back in time, to recreate the information landscape before the outcome was known. Ask, what did we know then? Was the process sound based on that information?
It stops people from rewriting history in their heads.
Precisely, which ties directly into fighting the narrative fallacy. Our minds, especially that fast, intuitive System 1, crave a simple, tidy story.
We want everything to make sense in hindsight, so we kind of smooth out the messy reality.
We retrofit the evidence to fit the outcome. We construct this neat causal chain that probably wasn't really there in the chaos of the moment.
Because of what was Kahneman's acronym? WYSIOT.
WYSIOT. What you see is all there is. Your mind builds the most coherent story it can using the limited information available after the fact. And this leads to what Kahneman calls the coherence confidence trick.
Confidence trick. How so?
Your subjective feeling of confidence. It often isn't based on how good or how much evidence you actually have. It's based on how coherent, how neat the story you've constructed feels, even if the evidence underpinning it is really weak or incomplete.
Wow. So if the story sounds good, we just trust it, even if it's built on shaky ground. That explains a lot about why some leaders seem so certain, even with sparse data.
It's a powerful illusion, and it gets worse. The way choices are presented, the language used, can completely hijack the analytical process. That's the power of framing effects.
Framing, how you package the information.
Exactly. The emotions we attach to words are often stronger than the objective value being discussed.
Can you give us the classic example? The loss versus cost one.
Sure. It boils down to this. Losses feel much worse than costs do. So if you frame a definite $500 payment as an uncompensated loss, say, due to market changes, people hate it. They're very loss averse.
Yeah.
But if you frame that exact same $500 payment as the necessary cost of insurance to protect against a much bigger potential risk, people overwhelmingly prefer it.
Even though the money is gone either way.
The financial reality is identical, but the framing changes the emotional reaction, and that dictates the choice. Our choices aren't always based on pure reality. They're heavily influenced by how our emotional system, one, reacts to the words used.
That's a massive challenge for anyone trying to communicate tough decisions like budget cuts or strategic trade-offs. You have to be incredibly careful with your language. #C. Creating resilience against disorder, anti-fragility.
Okay, so we've established the environment is complex, it's unpredictable, and our own minds have these built-in biases. How do we build organizations, build systems that don't just survive this chaos, but maybe even benefit from it?
This sounds like Nassim Taleb's idea, anti-fragility.
Exactly. Moving beyond just being robust or resilient, which means you resist shocks to being anti-fragile, meaning you actually get stronger, you improve when exposed to volatility and stressors.
How does that apply, say, to technology? Taleb has some interesting thoughts there.
He suggests that technology, when it works best, is often invisible. It practices what he calls self-subtraction. It removes older systems that were fragile or, just annoying and unnatural. The best tech often disappears into the background.
Okay, give me an example. What's a fragile system that got subtracted?
Think about old-school corporate bureaucracy. Endless paperwork, forms in triplicate, dealing with gatekeepers who were maybe rude or inefficient. Those systems were fragile because they relied on so many clunky, unnatural human steps.
Right. Very rigid.
The internet, for all its complexity, acts like a solvent on a lot of that. You often don't need to press 1 for English or wait for a human operator for basic things anymore. Good technology often removes those brittle, overly structured layers.
That implies something counterintuitive for modern business, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We love optimization, efficiency, lean processes. But you're saying extreme optimization might actually be fragile.
It absolutely can be. Taleb argues that highly optimized systems often become robust yet fragile. Think about just-in-time manufacturing in global supply chains.
Super efficient, saves tons of money on inventory.
Hugely efficient when things run smoothly, but that efficiency means there's no slack, no buffer, no excess capacity. So when a relatively small shock hits, remember the container ship stuck in the Suez Canal?
Yeah, chaos.
The entire global system ground to a halt because it was optimized only for smooth sailing, not for random, high-impact disruptions. Zero inventory looks great on the balance sheet until that single point of failure breaks, and then the whole thing shatters.
Okay, so if hyper-optimization is fragile, what's the anti-fragile alternative?
Well, look at a radical shift in thinking, like Dutch flood control. The old approach was command and control. Build higher dikes, stronger walls, fight the water.
Trying to impose order on nature.
Right. Which inevitably leads to a bigger catastrophe when the dike eventually fails, because it will fail at some point. The newer approach is called room for the river.
Room for the river. So, accepting the disorder.
It's a fundamental mind shift. Instead of trying to conquer the river, they accept that floods are inevitable. So they work with that reality. They buy land, relocate homes, dig overflow channels. They literally give the river space to flood safely.
That's fascinating. So a resilient or even anti-fragile system doesn't try to eliminate disorder. It kind of incorporates it, learns from it.
It accepts it, makes room for it, and in some cases can even benefit from that variability rather than trying to engineer it out of existence, which just makes you more vulnerable to the shocks you didn't predict.
That idea of building robust internal systems, ones that can handle shocks, connects really nicely with what the ancient philosophers were saying about leadership effectiveness. If you're going to lead through all this complexity and uncertainty you've been talking about, you need a really solid moral core.
Absolutely. And Cicero, the Roman statesman and philosopher, makes this incredibly strong case that your moral compass isn't separate from practical success. It's actually essential for it. He insists that expediency, what seems practical or profitable in the short term, simply cannot coexist with immorality in the long run.
Wait, say that again. Expediency and immorality cannot coexist? That sounds pretty radical compared to how a lot of people think today. We often assume there's a trade-off, right? Do the right thing or do the profitable thing.
Cicero flips that completely. He argues that because human nature deep down craves what is right, what is fitting, what is consistent, then what is right must be either the only good or the supreme good. And if it's the supreme good, then by definition, it must also be the most truly expedient choice in the grand scheme of things.
So the unethical shortcut is never really a shortcut. Why not? What's the hidden cost?
The cost is immediate and internal. Cicero says that ignoring this unity between morality and utility, believing you can somehow profit from doing wrong, is the root cause of all frauds, wrongs, and crimes. People focus on the potential external gain, the profit they might see.
But they miss the internal damage.
They miss the real, immediate, and intensely bitter punishment. The damage to their own character, the feeling of guilt itself, the corrosion of their own integrity.
So the punishment isn't just about getting caught by others or breaking the law. It's something you inflict on yourself.
Exactly. The framework for integrity is fundamentally internal. You experience the consequence, the foulness of soul, as they called it, even if you manage to hide your actions from everyone, gods and men included. That internal decay is ultimately the most destructive outcome. #tag be action and integrity.
Okay, if the real consequence is internal, that must mean your intention, your deliberation, matters just as much as the final action.
Cicero puts it incredibly starkly. He says, even if you could escape the notice of everyone, if you had like a superpower of invisibility, you still shouldn't do anything unjust. Why? Because the mere act of considering doing wrong, the deliberation itself, is criminal because it's already tainted your internal constitution. You've already damaged yourself.
Wow, that sets an incredibly high bar. How did the Romans then define a good man based on this? What was the standard?
The definition was quite clear. A good man is one who benefits everyone he can and harms no one unless he's provoked by a genuine injury or injustice. This person, even if they had a secret opportunity, say, to slip their name into a rich person's will unnoticed or use secret insider information,
They wouldn't take it.
they wouldn't. Not because they fear getting caught, but because the act itself diminishes them. It violates their internal code. It's all about prioritizing character over perceived advantage.
And this isn't just abstract philosophy, is it? There's that amazing, if brutal, story of Regulus that illustrates this.
Marcus Attilius Regulus. Yeah, a Roman general captured by the Carthaginians during the Punic Wars. They sent him back to Rome, but only after he swore an oath that he would return to Carthage if he couldn't negotiate a prisoner exchange that favored Carthage.
So he goes back to Rome, and the Roman Senate basically tells him, don't be ridiculous, stay here. You're too valuable.
Right. They advised him to stay. But Regulus refused. He went back to Carthage, knowing full well what awaited him.
Which was?
Brutal torture and death. He willingly chose that agonizing fate to keep his oath to the enemy inviolate.
He literally chose torture and death over breaking his word. That's hard to comprehend today.
It demonstrates an incredible internal calculus. For Regulus, the moral stain of breaking his oath, that foulness of soul, that meanness, was considered a far greater evil than the physical pain, however horrific. His integrity was worth more than his life.
And you contrast that incredible act with the pathetic story of the other soldier trying to loophole his oath.
Ah, yes, the soldier Hannibal sent back after the Battle of Cannae. Similar situation. He was under oath to return to Hannibal's camp unless the Senate agreed to ransom the Roman prisoners.
So what did he do?
He wanted to stay in Rome, but pretend he'd fulfilled his oath. So he leaves Hannibal's camp, then quickly rides back, pretending he forgot something trivial. Then he goes back to Rome and stays, claiming, "See, I technically returned to the camp. My oath is fulfilled."
Trying to cheat the spirit of the oath by adhering to the bare minimum letter, it's just slimy.
It's what Cicero calls foolish cunning, a complete perversion of real wisdom or prudence. And the Roman Senate saw right through it. They decreed that this guy, this rogue and cheat, should be sent back to Hannibal in chains.
They didn't protect him.
No, they viewed his deceit as making the perjury worse, not annulling it. And furthermore, the Senate famously refused Hannibal's offer to ransom the 8,000 Roman prisoners he held. They said they did this deliberately, that it might be engrafted in the minds of our soldiers that they must either conquer or die.
Wow. They chose the tough, principled, long-term strategic action, reinforcing courage in their army over the seemingly expedient move of getting their soldiers back cheaply.
It showed that same commitment. Rightness is expediency in the long run. #RIN, internal direction, and external law.
Okay, so this internal compass, this personal constitution that demands integrity. It sounds like something you have to actively cultivate. It doesn't just happen.
That's a great point. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, suggested something similar. He said, we don't really invent our missions in life. We sort of detect them through our conscience.
Detecting your mission, I like that.
And that process of detection, of listening to your conscience, helps form your personal constitution. It's what Stephen Covey would later call proactivity, the first habit.
Remind us what Covey meant by proactivity.
It means recognizing that your choices are the primary determinant of your life, not your circumstances. If you start thinking the problem is out there, blaming other people, blaming the situation, Covey says that thought itself is the problem. You have to take full responsibility for yourself first. Work on you.
Okay, so you have this internal integrity, this proactivity, but that needs to exist within a stable society, right? Which brings us to the need for external rules, for laws.
Absolutely. John Locke, the philosopher, argued that the main reason people form societies and governments is to protect their property and their rights, to get that security which you don't have in a chaotic state of nature.
Where everyone is their own judge and jury.
Exactly. To avoid that chaos, Locke said political power must establish clear, promulgated standing laws and known, authorized judges to apply them fairly.
So clear, public laws create the predictable framework you need for people to cooperate and build things long-term.
Precisely. And interestingly, this need for structure, for following established guidelines, isn't just political or legal. It even extends into spiritual life. The Bhagavad Gita, the Hindi scripture, makes this point very clearly. It says that someone who ignores the established guidelines, the Shaskravagim, and just acts based on their own whims, driven by lust or desire, that person will never achieve perfection or true happiness or reach the ultimate goal.
Shastravidim. Can you explain that term a bit more?
Sure, it basically refers to the established injunctions or directions found in scripture or authoritative texts, the prescribed duties, the ethical guidelines. Think of it like the instructions on a bottle of medicine.
If you ignore the instructions and just take random amounts whenever you feel like it.
You won't get the intended benefit, and you might even harm yourself. Similarly, the Gita suggests that action needs to be guided by these established principles to avoid chaotic, self-destructive results driven by momentary impulses. The structure, whether it's legal or spiritual or even medical, is necessary for effectiveness.
Okay, so let's take that foundation, the internal moral core, the commitment to integrity even when no one's watching, and apply it to how we lead teams, especially in those high-stakes, complex situations we see in modern business or even military settings. The focus seems to shift dramatically toward accountability and really clear communication, hashtag A, prioritizing and owning the outcome.
Yes, and one powerful framework that comes out of intense, high-stakes environments is extreme ownership. This comes from the Navy SEALs, Jocko Willink, and Leif Babin.
Extreme ownership. It sounds intense. What does it mean in practice?
It means the leader, regardless of who technically made the mistake, has to sideline their ego completely and take full personal responsibility for any failure that happens on their watch.
Okay, but isn't that just like a motivational phrase? What's the actual practical benefit for a business team? Why is it more than just saying the buck stops here?
Because it's a powerful mechanism for learning. Fast, systemic learning. If the leader immediately says, okay, that failure is on me, I didn't communicate the plan clearly enough, or I failed to get you the resources you needed, what happens next?
The team doesn't get defensive.
Exactly. The focus shifts instantly away from blame and towards analyzing the system, the strategy, the process. What went wrong here? But if the leader points fingers and blames the subordinate, what happens?
Defensiveness, cover-ups, learning stops dead.
Right. By taking extreme ownership, the leader forces themselves and the team to do a really honest self-assessment, find the flaw in the system or the plan, and then rapidly recalibrate to make the whole organization stronger. It drives improvement like nothing else.
So the ultimate responsibility always flows upwards to the person with the most authority.
Always. And that responsibility also means demanding ruthless simplicity, especially when things get chaotic.
Simplicity in chaos. Tell me more.
Well, in really complex, high-pressure situations, the book uses the example of a firefight. Murderous bursts of machine gun fire hammering our position. Your plans have to be simple.
Because complexity just breaks down under pressure.
Complexity kills. Absolutely. If the plan is too elaborate, too many moving parts, too many contingencies, it falls apart when the first shot is fired, literally or metaphorically.
So the goal is clarity.
Make the plan simple enough that even when everything is going sideways, every single person knows their role and can execute their part decisively. One of the SEAL leaders realized, looking back at a tough situation, that if he had made the patrol plan more complex, adding different radio frequencies, more layers of command, it would have been a disaster. Simplicity acts like a force multiplier when you're under fire. Hashtag had B. Crucial communication skills.
Okay, so you've got ownership, you've got simplicity. The next big piece seems to be how people actually talk to each other, especially when things get tough. Our sources call these crucial conversations.
Right. And they define a crucial conversation very specifically. It's any conversation where three things are present. The stakes are high, opinions differ, and emotions are running strong.
That sounds like most important work conversations, actually.
Pretty much. And the goal in these conversations isn't just to win the argument or get your way. The goal is something much more constructive, to create a shared pool of meaning.
A shared pool of meaning. What's that?
It's the collective understanding of the team. It's where everyone's relevant thoughts, feelings, data points, even the sensitive or controversial ones need to end up openly and safely. Because that shared pool is what the team uses to make the wisest decisions.
But getting information into that pool, especially the tough stuff,
Yeah.
that's hard.
It's incredibly hard because it requires a fundamental shift away from how most of us naturally communicate.
It is.
Listening with the intent to reply, not to understand.
Waiting for your turn to talk, basically.
Exactly. Most people filter everything they hear through their own experiences, their own viewpoints. Covey calls it reading their autobiography into other people's lives. We project our own home movies onto what others are saying and doing, and we spend our listening time preparing our rebuttal or our counter argument.
So step one is just genuine listening.
Empathic listening. Seeking first to understand the other person's perspective deeply before you even think about presenting your own. Because if someone doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel understood, they shut down. They become defensive, and they're definitely not open to your influence, no matter how brilliant your argument is.
Okay, understanding first. But what about when you do need to share something difficult, like critical feedback? There's a specific tool for that in the sources, right? Radical candor.
Yes, radical candor from Kim Scott. It's about finding that sweet spot that requires doing two things at the same time. You have to care personally about the other person, and you have to challenge directly.
Care personally and challenge directly, both at once.
Both at once. You need to communicate genuinely that you value the person, you believe in their potential, you care about their growth, and you need to be unmistakably clear and specific about where their work is falling short of the standard.
What happens if you miss one of those?
Well, if you challenge directly but don't show you care personally, you just come across as obnoxious aggression. You're just a jerk. If you care personally but fail to challenge directly, that's ruinous empathy. You're so worried about hurting feelings that you don't give the feedback needed for improvement.
Okay, but let's be honest. In a fast-paced, high-pressure work environment, doesn't radical candor sometimes just become an excuse for people to be brutally direct, maybe wrapping it in a thin layer of "I care about you"?
That's definitely the danger if it's not done with real humility and skill. The sources emphasize it needs to be done privately. It needs to focus specifically on the work or the behavior, never on personality traits.
So this report missed the key data point, not "you're sloppy."
Exactly. And crucially, the person giving the feedback should ideally share times they've received similar criticism or made similar mistakes. It humanizes the whole exchange. It makes it about upholding standards and helping someone grow, not about asserting dominance.
It sounds like ultimately this comes down to a leader's willingness to embrace discomfort.
That's a huge part of it. Patrick Lencioni talks about this in the context of team accountability.
Yeah.
Once a team has truly committed to shared goals, leaders must be willing to engage in interpersonal discomfort,
Oui.
meaning having that tough conversation, directly challenging a teammate who isn't pulling their weight or meeting commitments. It feels uncomfortable in the moment, but the alternative, avoiding the conflict, letting resentment build, engaging in office politics, is far more destructive. It leads to failure to achieve the results the team committed to, so you have to choose. Temporary discomfort or ultimate failure. ###C. Creating collaborative results.
So let's say you navigate that discomfort. You have the candid conversations, people feel heard, the feedback is delivered well. What's the ideal outcome? Where does that kind of dialogue lead?
Ideally, it leads beyond just compromise. It leads to synergy. This is Covey's framework again, the idea of the third alternative.
The third alternative. Not your way, not my way, but a better way.
Exactly. It's not compromise, where both sides maybe give up something they value to meet in the middle. A third alternative is a solution that is genuinely better, more effective, more creative than what either party brought to the table initially.
How do you get there?
It requires real vulnerability and openness. You have to genuinely value the differences in perspective and believe that by combining those different views, you can create something superior. It's transformative, not just transactional. And Covey emphasizes it builds both the relationship, he calls it PC, production capability, and gets the immediate result, P, production.
So it strengthens the team while solving the problem.
Yes. The energy it releases, the creativity it unlocks when people feel safe enough to truly collaborate. It can be profound.
But what if? What if you try really hard, you have the candid dialogue, you seek understanding, but you genuinely cannot find a synergistic solution that meets everyone's core needs? Does it just break down then?
That's where the highest level of the win-win paradigm comes in. Win-win or no deal.
Win or no deal, explain that.
It means that if, after sincere effort, you simply cannot find a solution that feels like a true win for both parties, you agree, ideally up front, to simply walk away agreeably. No deal.
No forcing a bad compromise.
Exactly. It removes the pressure to manipulate or coerce the other side into accepting something they don't really want. It acknowledges that maybe this particular deal or partnership just isn't right for both sides. It's far better, Covey argues, to realize that early on, before expectations are set and resentment builds up.
That takes a lot of confidence, though, to be willing to say no deal and walk away.
It requires emotional security and an abundance mentality, believing there are other opportunities out there. But it preserves the relationship and avoids future conflict.
Okay, so whether you reach a third alternative or agree on no deal, how do you wrap up these important conversations to make sure the learning sticks?
There's a really simple but powerful tool from the Coaching Habit Framework. It's about ending the conversation, whether it was positive or challenging, with one specific question.
Which is,
What was most useful here for you?
what was most useful here for you? Why that question?
It does a couple of things. First, it forces the other person to pause, reflect, and actively process what just happened. They have to identify their own key takeaway, which helps embed the learning. Second, it makes the conversation feel valuable to them, like they gained something concrete. It ends the interaction on a positive, forward-looking note, even if the topic was difficult.
All right, we've covered individual mindset, ethics, communication. But how do these principles scale up? How do you build an entire organization that embodies this kind of effectiveness and can sustain success over the long haul?
This brings us to a really crucial distinction Liz Wiseman talks about: the difference between leaders who act as multipliers and those who act as diminishers. #A, multipliers versus diminishers.
Multipliers and diminishers. Okay, what's the difference?
Diminishers are often smart, capable leaders, but they unintentionally shut down the intelligence of the people around them. They tend to be the smartest person in the room, the know-it-all who has all the answers. They jump in too quickly. They micromanage. They basically suck the oxygen and the ownership out of the team.
So they might be brilliant, but they make everyone else feel less capable.
Exactly. They underutilize the talent they have, leaving huge amounts of potential untapped. The multiplier, on the other hand, does the opposite.
They amplify intelligence.
Yes. Multipliers are talent magnets. They actively make the people around them smarter, more capable, more engaged. They don't need to be the source of all ideas. They're cultivators of intelligence in others.
How do they do that?
They ask challenging questions rather than giving answers. They create space for others to think and solve problems. They look for genius in others and give them room to run. Wiseman found that multipliers get roughly twice the capability out of their people compared to diminishers, using the same resources.
Wow, double the output just by changing the leadership style.
It's huge. And this connects directly to a fundamental point about management effectiveness that Peter Drucker made decades ago. He argued that the core challenge in management isn't really selecting people with high potential.
It isn't. We spend so much time on hiring.
Hiring matters, of course. But Drucker's point was, even if we had perfect hiring processes, the impact would be minimal if we haven't first created the organizational climate where human potential can actually grow and be utilized.
So the bottleneck isn't finding talent, it's creating the environment for that talent to thrive.
Exactly. We are likely a long, long way from fully tapping into the human capability we already have inside our organizations. The real leverage comes from building that multiplier environment, that climate that fosters growth and contribution. #tag deeply outward news. Strategic focus and courage.
Okay, so you create this environment, you multiply the intelligence of your team, but all that energy needs direction, right? The organization needs focus.
Absolutely. And this is where Jim Collins's framework of the hedgehog concept becomes so critical.
The hedgehog concept. Remind us of the 3 circles.
It's about finding the intersection of 3 things. 1, what can you be the absolute best in the world at? Not just good at, but best. 2, what drives your economic engine? What's your key metric for sustainable financial success? And 3, what are you deeply passionate about?
Find that intersection and focus relentlessly on it.
Relentlessly. And the key word there, Collins stresses, is courage.
Courage to do what?
The courage to say no to everything else. The courage to channel your resources, your energy, your focus into that one core area where you can truly dominate, even if it means cutting off other activities that might seem profitable or have historical significance.
He gives the example of Walgreens.
Right, a classic example. Back in the 1970s, Walgreens had a pretty significant and profitable food service business inside their stores. Lunch counters, small restaurants.
And conventional wisdom says, it's making money, don't mess with it.
Right. But the Walgreens leadership looked hard at the hedgehog circles. Could they be the best in the world at food service? No way. What truly drove their economics and their passion? Convenient drugstore retail.
Yeah, so they made a tough call.
They made the courageous call to get out of the food service business entirely, even though it was profitable. That decision freed up enormous capital, store space, and management attention. It allowed them to pour everything into becoming the best, most convenient drugstore chain in America. That unwavering focus was key to their massive sustained growth.
That kind of focus, that clarity about purpose, it seems like it's now expanding beyond just the company's bottom line. We're seeing this push towards a broader vision, like the net positive movement.
Yes, absolutely. Paul Polman and Andrew Winston champion this idea of net positive business. It's a vision where companies aim to actively improve the well-being of everyone they touch: employees, suppliers, customers, communities, the planet itself.
So business success isn't just about minimizing harm, it's about actively doing good, making the world better.
Exactly. It's shifting from just taking value from the world to creating value for the world. And crucially, they argue this isn't just some fuzzy, feel-good ideal. It's potentially the biggest economic opportunity we've ever seen.
The numbers are pretty wild, aren't they?
They estimate that achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, tackling things like poverty, climate change, inequality, could unlock something like $12 trillion in market opportunities and create nearly 380 million jobs globally by 2030, just in 4 key sectors alone.
$12 trillion.
It requires a huge shift in leadership thinking, moving capital away from unsustainable practices and towards these transformative partnerships and solutions. It's essentially applying structured, strategic problem-solving, that McKinsey-like thinking, to global challenges. #C. Maintaining the empire. Cyropedia.
But even if a company achieves that kind of success, that focus, that positive impact, there's a final, perhaps sobering framework we found. It comes from way back from Xenophon's book about Cyrus the Great.
Ah, the Cyropedia. Yes, Xenophon, through Cyrus, makes this incredibly insightful observation. Founding an empire or achieving great success might just take daring and energy,
Right.
but keeping it, that's much harder.
Maintaining success is harder than achieving it. Why?
Because it requires constant diligence, self-restraint, self-command. It speaks to this sort of natural law of decay. The very virtues that helped you build the success, the discipline, the hunger, the focus, are often the first things you neglect once success brings comfort and ease.
So success breeds complacency. The pressure comes off and the discipline starts to slip.
It seems to be a powerful human tendency. Cyrus worried constantly about his victorious Persian soldiers surrendering to indolence and luxury. He knew that once that happened, their core strengths, their temperance, self-control, courage would start to decay, to fall back into rottenness and death, as Xenophon vividly puts it.
He had to actively fight against that sense of entitlement, that feeling of, we've made it, now we can relax.
Yes. He had to constantly remind them not to become like the degenerate, who think that labor is the worst of evils and freedom from toil the height of happiness. The work of maintaining excellence never ends.
So maybe the ultimate leadership task isn't the initial climb to the top, but rather maintaining the integrity, the discipline, the diligence that makes you worthy of staying there. It's a constant internal process, isn't it? Never resting on your laurels.
It's a commitment to the process, not just the prize. #Tag5 conclusion.
Wow. Okay, so we started this deep dive looking for universal frameworks for effectiveness. We pulled from ancient Rome, modern psychology, Navy SEALs, global economics, pretty disparate sources.
Yeah.
But the threads connecting them are, well, they're incredibly strong, aren't they?
They really are. It's this relentless convergence again and again between your internal state, your clarity, your ethics, your mindset, and your external results. We tracked it all the way from Cicero, arguing that being ethical is the most expedient path because guilt is the ultimate price.
Right, the internal cost.
All the way through to modern frameworks like extreme ownership, where taking internal responsibility drives external learning, or synergy, where internal openness leads to better external solutions. The integrity of your inner game consistently dictates your long-term outer game. Luck plays a role short-term, sure, but the principles seem constant.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. These frameworks, whether they're ancient philosophy or modern consulting tools like you'd find at McKinsey, they don't really define success as like a final destination.
Right.
Not a one-off victory or a pile of money.
No, success seems to be framed as a process, a continuous, structured process of self-awareness, principled action, honest communication, and rigorous analysis applied over and over again to complexity.
It's never done.
Which raises an important question, maybe. Why is it that when we face big challenges today, we so often look back at historical figures or successful leaders and try to copy their specific actions, their tactics, rather than really internalizing the underlying universal principles they were operating from.
Like we focus on what they did, not why it worked or the mindset behind it.
Exactly. We seem to obsess over the surface details rather than digging down to the fundamental mechanism.
Maybe it's easier. Maybe it feels less daunting to copy a tactic than to actually change our own internal operating system. We externalize the genius, put it out there in history, so we don't have to do the hard work of applying the principle ourselves.
Could be. Which, brings us to a final, maybe slightly provocative thought to leave you with. This one comes courtesy of the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who could be pretty cynical.
Okay, let's hear it.
Hobbes once wrote, "The praise of ancient authors proceeds not from the reverence of the dead, but from the competition and mutual envy of the living."
Ouch. So he's saying sometimes we praise the greats of the past, not out of genuine respect, but maybe to make ourselves look smart, or to subtly criticize people around us today by comparison.
That's the cynical reading, yeah. The implication is if we truly want to be effective, if we want these frameworks to work for us, then just admiring Cicero or quoting Drucker isn't enough.
We have to actually do the work.
Yeah, we have to wrestle with these principles directly. Extreme ownership, radical candor, courageous focus, the third alternative, ethical integrity, and sincerely try to apply them in our own messy, complex lives and work, regardless of who said them first.
The knowledge is the framework. Your application is the deep dive.
Go apply it.